The Praetorian Guard, Chapter 5, Waking in the Dark. John's mind stirred in a fog of confusion, a haze of disjointed thoughts and sensations that floated just out of reach. His body felt heavy, weighed down by an unfamiliar numbness, as though he had been disconnected from his own skin. Slowly, he became aware of his surroundings, the warmth of liquid surrounding him, the rhythmic hum of machinery, the soft pulsing of something beneath the surface of his consciousness. He blinked, his vision blurred as his eyes struggled to adjust. The familiar glow of soft, sterile light filtered through the glass walls of the regeneration tube. He was back in the same room, the cold, clinical place where this new chapter of his life had begun. The last clear memory he had was lying on an operating table, Sarah's voice echoing in his ears. "When you wake up, you'll be one of us." Truly, now, he was awake, and the words hung in the air like a distant echo. John's muscles protested as he tried to move, stiff from days of inactivity. The liquid that cradled him in the regeneration tube began to drain, and with it came the sensation of weight returning to his limb. The glass canopy hissed open, allowing the crisp, sterile air of the room to wash over him. For a moment, he just sat there, disoriented, blinking against the harsh light as his senses slowly sharpened. He turned his head, the movement slow and deliberate, and through the lingering haze, he saw her, Sarah. She sat beside his tube, relaxed in a chair with one leg casually crossed over the other, her posture at ease, but her eyes sharp and observant. She'd been waiting. As his vision cleared, her lips curved into a faint smile, though there was something detached in her expression. "Good," she said softly, her voice breaking the silence. "You're back among the living, John." John blinked again, swallowing against the dryness in his throat. His body felt alien, like a machine not yet fully under his control. He flexed his fingers slowly, watching them move, and though the motions were fluid, precise even, it felt strange. Too smooth, too efficient. Sarah rose from her chair with graceful ease, crossing the small space between them in just a few steps. "Your implants are fully integrated into your system," she continued, her voice steady and matter-of-fact. "The operation was a success." John opened his mouth to speak, but found that no words came out at first. His mind was still catching up, processing everything that had happened. Finally, after a beat, his voice emerged, rough and hoarse from disuse. How long was I out?" 3 days. Sarah replied, her tone casual, as though they were discussing nothing more than a routine medical procedure. "Your body needed time to recover from the trauma of the surgery and to adapt to the changes." Changes. John's mind latched onto the word, and he slowly swung his legs over the edge of the tube, planting his feet on the cold floor. The sensation was strange. His balance, his coordination, even the way his muscles responded to commands felt off, like they were too quick, too ready. He glanced at Sarah, uncertainty in his eyes. "And the implants?" His voice trailed off, still weak, but the question hung in the air. Sarah's smile widened slightly, though it never quite reached her eyes. "They've integrated perfectly with your system," she said. "You're faster now. Your reflexes, your strength, even your vision, all enhanced. You'll notice the difference soon enough." John looked down at his hands, flexing them once more. His fingers moved effortlessly, the muscles beneath his skin tightening with an almost mechanical precision. It was as though his body had been upgraded, fine-tuned in ways that he couldn't fully understand yet. The implants weren't just beneath his skin. They were part of him now, part of everything he would become. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "It feels different. Like my body's moving faster than my mind. That's normal," Sarah said, stepping closer, her gaze locked onto his. "Your brain is still adjusting to the enhancements. Your reflexes are now beyond what most humans are capable of, so it'll take time for your mind to catch up to your body's new speed. But it will pass. You'll learn to control it." John nodded slowly, but deep down he wasn't sure how to feel. His entire life had trained to be a soldier, a guardian of the Dominion. But this was something else. something beyond the boundaries of what he thought was possible. He was no longer just a soldier. He had been turned into something more. His gaze drifted to the medical equipment that lined the walls, the machines still humming with the quiet pulse of energy, and for a moment he couldn't help but wonder, what had they turned him into?
"You're stronger now,"
Sarah said, as though reading his thoughts.
"Faster. Your senses are heightened. Your body can process information faster than ever before, and you'll find that your reactions are almost instantaneous. But that's just the beginning."
John clenched his fists, testing the strength in his arms. The muscles responded perfectly, fluid and powerful. He felt like a coiled spring, ready to explode into action at the slightest provocation. It was exhilarating, but also deeply unsettling.
"And now?"
John asked, his voice stronger than before. Sarah's smile faded, replaced by a cold, calculating expression.
"Now, we start your real training,"
she said, her tone taking on a sharper edge.
"The operation was only the first step. You've been given the tools to survive in the world we operate in, but tools are useless without the skills to wield them. That's what comes next."
John met her gaze, the weight of her words sinking in. This was no ordinary training. The shadows of the night were not just soldiers, they were something else entirely. They didn't fight wars on open battlefields or patrol the streets like the Black Bear Company. They fought in the shadows, in the places where no one else could go, where no one else dared to go. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus.
"And the mission? What is it exactly that we do?"
Sarah's eyes narrowed, her tone growing more serious.
"We eliminate threats to the Empire before they can reach the surface. Rebels, traitors, criminals, anyone who poses a danger to the stability of the Dominion. The world doesn't know we exist, John, and that's the way it has to stay. We operate in the darkness, handling the Emperor's most sensitive problems."
She paused, watching his reaction.
"We don't have the luxury of failure. The enemies we face don't play by the rules, and neither do we."
John absorbed the gravity of her words. This was more than just being a soldier. It was about being an agent of the Empire's will, a tool for keeping the Dominion intact, by any means necessary. Sarah stepped closer, her voice lowering.
"This isn't just about fighting, John. It's about becoming someone else. The person you were before, the cadet, the soldier in training, that part of you is gone. What's left is the weapon we've made you into."
John stared at her, the reality of her words sinking in like a cold weight in his chest. He wasn't the same man who had walked into this facility. He had been changed, transformed into something more dangerous, more lethal. But part of him wondered if he'd lost something in the process. Something human. Sarah seemed to sense his unease, and for a brief moment, her expression softened.
"I know this is a lot to take in,"
she said, her voice quieter now.
"You didn't choose this, but you were chosen for a reason. You survived the test, and now you've been given the chance to be something more, to make a difference."
John nodded, though the words felt hollow. He knew he had no choice now. He was in too deep, too far gone to turn back. The only way forward was through the darkness. Sarah gestured toward the door, her posture returning to its usual sharpness.
"Rest a bit longer. When you're ready, we'll begin your training, and then I'll show you what the shadows of the night are truly capable of."
With that, she turned and left the room, the door sliding shut behind her with a soft hiss. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of solitary routine and intense physical recovery. John spent his days training alone, pushing his newly enhanced body to its limits under the watchful eye of the facility's 2 doctors. They were efficient but distant, their only focus ensuring that his implants functioned as intended and that his body adjusted to the dramatic changes. Every morning, John ran a gauntlet of exercises designed to test his speed, strength, reflexes, and endurance. The implants had turned his body into a finely tuned weapon, and he could feel the improvements with every passing day. It wasn't just physical. John had to learn to control his heightened senses. The way every sound, every movement around him felt magnified. The doctors monitored his progress, noting how quickly his mind adapted to the new sensory input. He noticed his reflexes were lightning fast now, his vision sharper in the dark, and his body more resilient to fatigue. But even with the improvements, there was a constant tension, a battle to keep everything under control. When he wasn't training, John took the opportunity to explore. One morning, after a particularly grueling session in the training room, he found a set of narrow stairs leading to an exit he hadn't noticed before. Curiosity got the better of him, and he followed the path to an open hatch. The sunlight hit him like a wave, momentarily disoriented after so many days underground. As his eyes adjusted to the brightness, he realized that the facility, the headquarters of the Shadows of the Night, was located beneath what appeared to be an ordinary farm. A sprawling expanse of fields stretched out before him, the sky a vast canvas of clear blue. From the outside, it looked peaceful, serene, like any other rural farm outside the capital. There were animals in pens, crops in neat rows, and a long dirt road winding toward the city in the distance. But John knew better now. Beneath the surface, deep underground, was something far more dangerous. A hidden fortress housing a secret organization that operated in the darkness, outside the knowledge of the world. It was a strange contrast, the calm of the farm and the deadly purpose of the underground base. John spent hours walking the perimeter, stretching his legs and letting the wind clear his head. But no matter how far he wandered, he couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped, bound to a life that was no longer his own. The enhancements in his body made him feel powerful, but the isolation weighed on him. He was alone, surrounded by secrecy and shadows. The only person who broke the silence was Sarah. For 2 weeks, she stayed away, giving him space to recover and adjust. But John knew she was watching. Every day, he could feel her presence, lingering just out of reach. The real training hadn't started yet, but he knew it was coming. The countdown ticked in his mind, a constant reminder that everything so far had been just preparation. And then, the day arrived. John woke early that morning, the pale light of dawn filtering through the narrow vents in his... He lay still for a moment, feeling the quiet hum of the facility around him. Cooler underground, the temperature controlled by unseen mechanisms. Today was different. It was the day he had been waiting for, his first real training with Sarah. John got up and headed for the shower, the cold water helping to clear his mind. His body felt strong, more responsive than ever before, but there was still a knot of uncertainty in his chest. He had no idea what to expect from Sarah's training, and part of him wondered if he was truly ready. He had spent weeks honing his new abilities, but this was the real test. After getting dressed in the standard black jumpsuit he had grown accustomed to, John made his way to the dining room. The room was quiet, with only the faint hum of machinery and the soft clink of dishes breaking the silence. He grabbed a simple breakfast from the counter, protein bars and a glass of water, and sat at a corner table. A few minutes later, the door slid open, and Sarah entered. She moved with the same controlled grace, her eyes sharp and calculating, though there was a slight smile on her lips when she saw John. She carried her own tray and sat across from him without a word, digging into her meal with a soldier's efficiency. For a while, they ate in silence. John couldn't help but steal glances at her, wondering what she had planned for the day. Her demeanor was calm, but there was an edge to it, a sense of purpose, that made him uneasy. He was about to ask her what the day would hold when she spoke first.
"Are you ready for your first day of training?"
Sarah's voice was smooth, but there was a challenge in her tone, as if she already knew the answer. John met her gaze, nodding.
"I am."
Sarah raised an eyebrow, her smile widening just slightly, but it never reached her eyes.
"Good."
She motioned for him to finish his breakfast, and when they were done, she stood, gesturing for him to follow. John's heart beat faster as he rose from the table, feeling the weight of the moment settle on him. This was it. No more solitary training, no more doctors monitoring his progress. It was time for the real thing. Sarah led him through the familiar corridors of the underground facility, their footsteps echoing softly against the metallic floor. They passed through several security checkpoints, the walls smooth and featureless, the lighting dim. John's mind raced, his enhanced senses picking up every detail of the environment, every sound and shift of air around him. But despite the clarity of his perception, he had no idea what was waiting for him. They arrived at a large set of double doors, more imposing than the others John had seen in the facility. Sarah paused, her hand resting on the control panel for a moment before turning to him. Her face was unreadable, her eyes hard.
Once we go through these doors, John, your training truly begins. Everything you've done so far, everything you've learned, has been preparation. Today you'll face real challenges, ones designed to push you beyond your limits.
John nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He had expected this, but the gravity of her words weighed on him. Sarah pressed her hand to the panel, and the doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a vast chamber beyond. The room was enormous, much larger than he had anticipated, with various training modules spread across the space, obstacle courses, combat arenas, and sections dedicated to stealth and infiltration. It was a labyrinth of challenges, all designed to test every aspect of a soldier's abilities.
This,
Sarah said, stepping forward,
is where the shadows are forged.
John followed her into the chamber, his eyes scanning the space. There was a tension in the air, a sense of danger that made his pulse quicken. This wasn't just training, it was something far more intense. Sarah turned to face him, her posture rigid, her gaze cold and precise.
We don't have the luxury of normal training schedules here,
she said, her voice sharp.
Every mission we undertake is a matter of life and death. We fight in the shadows, and the enemies we face don't follow the rules of war. If you hesitate, you die. If you doubt yourself, you fail.
She stepped closer, her eyes boring into his.
There are no second chances in the field, John. You'll either become one of us, or you won't make it out alive.
John clenched his fists, steeling himself. He had already come this far. He couldn't back down now. Sarah's expression softened, but only slightly.
You have potential, John, but potential means nothing if you can't master it. Today, we'll see what you're really made of.
With that, she turned toward one of the training modules, motioning for him to follow. John took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders.